Hi everybody, how's it going? Today I'm going to talk about the 1983 film Return of the Jedi. Have the original trilogy here in this Blu-ray set. So this film was directed by Richard Marquand. It was written by George Lucas and Lawrence Kasdan. So this is the big finale to the original trilogy of Star Wars films, and I know a lot of people. Well, I guess the narrative with Jedi is that when you're a young person watching the trilogy, Jedi is your favorite one because it's the most kid-friendly of the original three. But as you get older and as an adult, you tend to like Empire more because of its more serious tone. But so Jedi, I guess, of the original trilogy, its reputation has probably fallen the most, but it's hard to say. It's always hard to judge and gauge with Star Wars films. It just is the way of them. Right, so wrapping up the saga, so this film is, and one way to think about the trilogy, the first Star Wars is more about myth and mythology and the hero's journey. Empire Strikes Back is more about maturity and dealing with failure and defeat. And Jedi is really about the spectacle. It's really kind of throwing everything into the sink with the big finale to Star Wars. And there's also a lot of what ifs as well when we think about Jedi and the course of the Star Wars franchise after Jedi, which I might talk about a little bit. But yeah, Jedi is very much it has some excess to it. It's the longest of the original three. There are some absolutely incredible special effects. Some of the special effects shots in Return of the Jedi are, I think, the best you'll ever see, not just in the 80s, but of any decade in particular. And that's one thing, I'll mention at the top. It always kind of makes me a little sad that they stopped making them because they had made so much progress with the technology and with the special effects in just 6 years. And you wonder if they had kept going through the 80s and the 90s, what future Star Wars films would have looked like. Of course, George Lucas put all of his worth in digital technology, of course, which we would get with the prequels, but that's a story for another time, as they say in Star Wars. But yeah, this is the big finale, and despite some of the flaws in Jedi, I mean the nostalgia with this movie, I think I wrote down it's maximum nostalgia watching Return of the Jedi. I actually did see this in the theater. I was almost 4 years old, but I have a clear memory of going to see it in a packed theater, and I don't even know if I had seen any Star Wars before it. I might have, but I do remember the sounds and the images. I remember Jabba's palace. I remember finding that frightening when I'm watching it as a very young person, and Darth Vader taking off his helmet. I remember that, and that felt like a huge moment, and remember that. And the Ewoks, of course, who are the most kid-friendly Star Wars characters ever, and I remember really having fun with the Ewoks and watching it. So yeah, so I do have. So that's why I wrote the nostalgia. It's just so thick with Return of the Jedi. I never had any toys. I know, but I remember seeing them in the store. Just the huge layouts of all the Return of the Jedi stores or figures and everything, all the toys. And I remember kids in school, we'd have show and tell day, and I remember kids would always bring in their Star Wars gear, and just I think someone had the Millennium Falcon or Darth Vader's shuttle, so I do remember that stuff. But I never got into Star Wars toys though, so anyway, but it is so. It's so intertwined with the memory of this movie coming out in 1983, and it's just the nostalgia value to it. And yeah, I think of it in some ways as the Abbey Road of Star Wars movies, because it's kind of big, it's bombastic, it's Lucas and his team really firing on all cylinders in terms of the special effects. And like I said before, you do wonder, like listening to Abbey Road, you wonder where would the Beatles have gone if they had continued on that creative trajectory. And you do think the same with Return of the Jedi sometimes. But anyway, the story itself, I mean, it's by far the most episodic of the original three films, where we have the business of rescuing Han Solo from Jabba's palace, which is the first big set piece of the movie, which at Jabba's palace. And this is, a chance to show off all the creature effects and to create something that's a little weird, a little almost gothic in some ways, where we get this side of this seamier side of the Star Wars universe that had been hinted at in previous films, but we're seeing it, for the first time here. So, that's fine at Jabba's palace. Of course, they rescue Han Solo. The whole gang's back together. We had that big battle on the barge, and Luke has to go off to say goodbye to Yoda, and Han and Lando and Leia go back to prepare for the final battle with the Empire that's coming up. And as we get into, I think the middle part of this movie is a little sluggish at times when we get on the moon of Endor. I like that they're outdoors. I do like that, and that the forest is a nice I guess change of scenery from what we've seen before. And I think with getting to, we meet the Ewoks, and they're, maybe, depending on your age, the Ewoks can sometimes be fun, sometimes be annoying, but there's a lot of hijinks kind of in that middle part of the movie. And then it does get serious again once they have the battle with the new Death Star, and Luke has to go off and confront Darth Vader, who he accepts as his father now. And really I think the climax of this movie is really, really great. I just think having like the three or four storylines, cutting back between them, that really works so well with the editing of this movie. And it's, some criticize Jedi as being a bit of a redo of Star Wars, because you bring back the Death Star and all that, go back to Tatooine and all that, and there's some truth in that maybe, but it's all so much bigger and so much more, it feels more epic scale, I guess would be the word I would use for it. So yeah, I mean, just powerful scenes. And yeah, we wrap up the trilogy. I mean, some of the criticisms of the movie, I mean, the Han Solo character in this one, Harrison Ford's performance is a little off in this one. I don't know if it's from the carbonite, some residue, some remnants from that, but he does seem to be making a lot of bad jokes and things like that. And so you do, I don't know, I think the series wasn't sure what to do with the character at this point, and Harrison Ford was ready to move on. I mean, Mark Hamill is really good in this. I mean, he's, as we see the more mature, more seasoned Luke, I think is really, really good throughout. Leia is back as well, and I always feel like Leia is kind of a missed opportunity in this film, where I know in some of the early scripts the movie was to begin with Leia leading a strike force on I think on Coruscant, and it would have been a chance for her to show off her leadership skills. And I guess she does some of that on Endor, as opposed to in Jabba's palace, where she's made to wear a slave outfit and all that. So but yeah, and the fact that Leia is a Jedi, and the whole brother sister thing comes in to play with this movie too. Another probably a misstep in the storytelling, but Lucas just wanted to wrap everything up. From all accounts I've had, that was really, the idea of the other is introduced in Empire Strikes Back, which, from what I've read, was meant to be Luke's sister that he was going to go in search of, and Leia was not originally not supposed to be his sister, but whatever, it works, I guess. That is the canon now, so that it is what it is. Yeah. So, like I said, it's just the movie's big, it's bombastic. I think the John Williams music is in Jedi. Maybe it's the least of the scores of the original trilogy, but I do think the music does so much to boost this movie, especially with the indoor scenes. And like I said, we don't really get the first two had the big themes. And Jedi, I guess we get the Emperor's theme, the throne room theme. We get that a little bit, and we get some of the music at Jabba's palace. Not the music in the special edition, but in the original one is interesting. And the whole Ewok party at the end, we get that music as well. So like I said, really great, really good score from John Williams, but like I said, it doesn't stand out quite as much as the previous two films, but that's a tall order anyway to do. So so I guess that kind of wraps up Jedi. Like I said, it was such a touchstone of the early 1980s, and to pick up on the point I mentioned earlier, you do wonder in alternate timelines if Lucas had decided to keep making Star Wars films every 3 years, and what those would have looked like, and how that would have changed the decade of the 1980s. It would have been more of a Star Wars pop culture, because once Jedi was out, it had its moment, and then Star Wars would go moribund or kind of fall asleep for a long time. It would be, like I said, I was almost 4 years old when Jedi came out, and I would be 19, 20 when Phantom Menace came out, so I was all grown up by then, childhood over, teenage years over, so it was a long gap in between, and you do wonder about the what ifs if it had continued, but I guess that's an interesting thought experiment. I guess Lucas paved the way for others, like James Cameron would continue on with the work of movies like that. Spielberg as well to also would continue on the work as Lucas stepped aside and kind of settled into being a producer and developing film technology and things like that. And I know a lot of personal stuff was going on too with Lucas, that and the amount of work and effort that went into making these movies, especially Jedi. I know it was a huge effort that took over people's lives, and so that's just the way it came out, I suppose. So anyway, I think that's all I had to say about Return of the Jedi, as we're in the early part of the 80s, and we're wrapping up the original Star Wars trilogy, and it will be a while before we talk about Star Wars again. So thanks for watching, and I will talk to you later. Bye.